Welcome to the May edition of our monthly workshop.
You are all welcome back. It's indeed a great pleasure having you once again. This event is hosted by Richflood, a leading continental provider of environmental and social due diligence services for investment in Africa. The topic for discussion today is sustainable procurement and circular economy, and the aim of this workshop is to create awareness on sustainable procurement and how organizations and individuals can integrate environmental and social factors into their procurement processes, as well as the transformation journey for businesses moving towards a circular economy. In the morning session, our speakers, Matthias Aye and Mary Bazeba, had shed light on this important topic. Our speakers discussed the benefit of migrating from linear economy to circular economy and their experiences through Just Dig It in Kenya. We believe you all had a wonderful time. In case you missed the morning session, the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel. This session will last for 1 hour. At this point, I will quickly intimate us of a few things we need to know in order to successfully participate in today's event. Kindly note that all participants are in listen-only mode. Rename yourself and add your organization after your name in bracket so that you can be appropriately identified. Poll questions will be utilized throughout this event. We appreciate your participation in answering these questions. Also be informed that you can send in your questions at any time during the event for our speakers to address them during the questions and answer session. To do this, kindly utilize the chat box, which is located at the bottom of your computer screen and at the top of the screen for tablet device users. Please also do well to include your name and location alongside your questions and comments. Thank you. Right now, I will introduce the speakers who will be taking us through this session. Our first speaker for this session is Dr. Comfort Asokoro Ogaji. Dr. Ogaji is the Group Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Richflood Group. She holds a PhD in strategic management and has been continuously working on global climate crisis, business sustainability strategies, and competitive advantage, focusing on how African investors and organizations can achieve sustainable development goals. As at the year 2020, she has coordinated and performed oversight duty on approximately 200 investment projects in Nigeria, ensuring environmental and sustainability considerations are incorporated in project planning all through operational and decommissioning phases. It's a pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon, ma'am. Our second speaker for this session is Mr. Peter Agabwe. Mr. Agabwe is a senior analyst at Richflood Laboratories Limited. He has several years of experience, especially relating to procurement of items for Richflood Laboratory. He has coordinated a lot of procurement activities for Richflood Laboratory, taking into consideration sustainability and circular economy. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Gabriel. Now we'll quickly go into the technical presentation for this session. We will start with Dr. Gaje. Over to you, ma'am, for your presentation.
I would be taking us very quickly. I hope that I'll be able to cover within the short period of time on sustainable procurement. Sustainable procurement. And today I'll be looking at four procuring sustainably. And I will be talking about priorities setting for sustainability issues. And I would also talk about sustainable procurement policy and strategy. So basically, ISO 20,400 20,400 is the world's first international standard to provide guidance on delivering sustainability objectives through supply chains. The standard provides guidance for any organization of any size or of any type that needs to deliver sustainable outcomes through their supply chains. It is relevant to anybody in an organization who contributes to procurement decisions and works with suppliers to know and practice the standard, including subcontractors. More than a standard, the ISO 20,400 is a management tool that helps teams see the value of sustainable procurement and communicate that within their organization, because communication is a key component of any change that is to occur. At its heart is the promotion of long-standing, robust procurement processes that deliver economic, social, and environmental value. I would say that sustainable procurement, in short, is simply good procurement. It is a powerful tool for leaders, for managers, for procurers to influence positive change within their organizations and for the society as a whole. The term sustainable procurement has different meanings. It has different meanings. We have buying social, we have green purchasing, we have social procuring, we have sustainable purchasing, buying green, and so on and so forth. These are different terminologies that is being used to describe almost the same thing in different organizations and during different gatherings or discussions. I would like to have a definition delivered to you based on the IEMA publication, Delivering Sustainable Outcomes Through Supply Chains, through ISO 20,400. What is sustainable procurement? These three components, most definitions have these three components in their definitions, which is focusing on environment, social, and economic impacts possible over the entire life cycle of your procurement process. Every organization has to look at these key components of sustainability and relate the same thing to procurement, because procurement is a powerful instrument for organizations wishing to behave in a responsible way and wishing to contribute to sustainable development and to the achievement, most importantly, of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. By integrating sustainability in a procurement policy or policies and practices, including supply chains, organizations can manage risk and opportunities more effectively for sustainable environment, social, and economic development. So this represents an opportunity. Sustainable procurement represents an opportunity to provide more value to the organization by improving product that it has better overview of the supply chain risk. You could see by imbibing this standard in your procurement processes, an organization can see the supply chain risk and opportunity and be better informed on what steps or decisions to make. Sustainable procurement also improves the organization's general sustainable sourcing strategy. A full life cycle approach helps organizations in making more informed commercial decisions. And also, sustainable procurement presents a long-term benefits by making use of alternative materials, innovation, and even emerging technologies. So next slide, please. A more effective process for proposal and bid evaluation is what sustainable procurement represents. However, there is this little confusion about corporate sustainability versus corporate responsibility. Okay, it's a cross-disciplinary corporate values approach for identifying and responding to critical social, environmental, and economic risks, opportunities, and dependencies faced by organizations and their stakeholders now and in the future. That is the sustainability part. That's the sustainable part. It's about now and in the future. Similar in nature to corporate responsibility is corporate sustainability. More explicitly, it encompasses longer-term dependencies and also the imperative to collaborate, innovate, and resolve sustainability challenges is a major difference that you can hold on to. New regulations, along with consumer and stakeholder pressure regarding sustainability issues, have made it crucial for businesses to manage and demonstrate their due diligence on the environment and also on the social and ethical risk in their business relationships, especially in their value chain. As a result, companies now more than ever are including CSR requirements in their contracts in the form of a sustainability clause, if you like, or a CSR clause in tender documents, in bid documents, or in any invitation or request for proposal documents. This practice can significantly contribute to supplier performance improvement and prove highly effective for CSR strategy in the long run. So I would show you Dubai in 1990 and Dubai in 2003, and I would like to hear your opinion about the difference. What do you think about Dubai in 1990 and the same street in 2003 in terms of sustainable development? All sustainability principles are in place or not? I don't know how much our audience would be able to judge these two. I wish that there's a poll here that could help us answer this question. 2013 Dubai and 1990 Dubai. How many years? And then the development that have taken place. What can you see? What can you see? And how do you check whether the sustainability principles were imbibed? Because we must develop. We must develop. However, sustainable development is the target here. There is an unfortunate reality and a myth amongst corporate entities that talks about putting more value on economic outcomes rather than social and environmental outcome. Most of the myths that you have amongst corporations today is majorly lack of sustainability awareness. Like what Richflood is doing today, we are bringing this awareness on sustainability to procurers or procurement specialists, managers, or even CEOs and MDs of companies, because it comes from the top to down. The commitment comes from the top to down. So there's a general lack of awareness about sustainability principles, about sustainable procurement itself. And also there is this myth that is not true, that sustainability is cost consuming and also time consuming. It's a myth that is not correct. And there's this assumption also that it is complex. Yes, every new concept have to go through a period, let's say it takes 3 to 5 years for the processes to be well understood and domesticated within an organization. So sustainable procurement is another of a concept that promotes sustainability that could take 3 to 5 years to understand, but in itself, it is not a complex concept that cannot be implemented. Organization culture also can lead to this sharp contrast between economic, social, and environmental factors that could lead to sustainability. The culture, most especially when the organization culture is risk averse. If the risk aversion is a key issue, then most organizations will not want to implement sustainable procurement. But we must understand that sustainable development is the goal many businesses and governments should be working towards. I want us to note that it is essential to focus on innovating and resolving the sustainability challenge rather than balancing and trading off the impacts between environment, social, or economic conditions. I would like to show you a classroom, and this was a procurement that was done to build this classroom. And I would like you to just do the puzzle in your mind if social and environmental issues were considered, most especially on the social aspect. Next slide, please. So our time. And also you have a building that was procured, and after a period of time, this is BBC News publication, the building began to collapse. Now money have been spent. That's why sustainability actually do not cost you more, it rather saves you more. It saves more money for an organization to incorporate these 3 key pillars of sustainability when procuring and throughout the procurement life cycle, throughout the life cycle of the processes, because sound sustainable procurement and contract management are one of the essential elements of good governance. Good practices reduces cost and produce timely results that are sustainable. Poor practices lead to waste and delays and are often the cause of allegations of corruptions and government inefficiencies. So finance and procuring officers has a critical role to play in achieving the laudable objective of sustainable procurement and in the overall contract management. Next slide, please. What about this? What about this picture that is coming up now? Next slide. Yes. What of this? Could poor due diligence practice be responsible for these results? These are the sustainable procurement brings on board. So it's not a complex process. It's not an unwanted process. It is rather a process that could lead to a lot of improvement. And we are hoping that procuring entities, ministries, agencies, departments, private sectors of government will look into this as a laudable idea and begin to put in place strategies that can address or include sustainable procurement in existing policies. So due diligence for sustainable procurement, according to the ISO 20400, is a way to address adverse impacts. When organizations identify potential adverse sustainability impacts in their supply chains, they should seek to prevent or control them. When organizations identifies these gaps or these impacts in the supply chains, they should seek to treat these impacts or remediate these impacts or control them. The procurer has a higher responsibility in making the supply chain sustainable. The subcontractors, the contractors, the procuring entity has a huge role to treat, to remediate or control all of these impacts that will be identified, potential adverse impact, most especially, that could be identified in the procurement process. So the organization should implement a due diligence process to address this impact and be accountable for it. Due diligence in the context of social responsibility is a comprehensive, proactive process to identify the actual and potential negative social and environmental and even economic impact of an organization's decisions and activities, with the aim of avoiding and mitigating those impacts. So due diligence may also entail influencing the behavior of others where they are found to be the cause of human rights or other violations in which the organization may be implicated. In any due diligence process, an organization should consider the context in which it operates or in which its activities takes place, the potential and the actual impact of its own activities, and the potential for negative consequences resulting from the actions of other entities or other persons whose activities are significantly linked to those of the organization. It's not about the organization itself. For instance, it's not about Richflood itself. It is about the chain of suppliers, of people relating as well with Richflood, which may generate negative consequences and therefore hamper the possibility of sustainable procurement in all its processes. It should include in a due diligence process, in a manner appropriate to the organization's size and circumstances, key components, which time may not allow me to mention them, but most importantly, integrating social responsibility core subjects throughout the organization by means of tracking performance over time to be able to make necessary adjustments in priorities and approach for the entire procurement processes. So in identifying the potential areas for action, an organization should strive to better understand challenges, or let's say dilemmas, from the perspective of the individuals and groups that potentially could be harmed due to this procurement decision. My next slide would be talking about setting priorities for sustainability issues. And I wrote there top management responsibility, because that is what it is. An organization should, to the fullest extent possible, exercise its capacity to influence the behaviors of their suppliers and other stakeholders towards one goal: sustainability. Members of the top management or individuals that undertake sustainability initiatives can use the sustainability hierarchy to prioritize the issues that could be identified in the processes. So influence can derive from many factors. The top leadership can influence all of these processes, or the top management, if you like, can influence all of these processes through a number of factors. It could be the degree of direct control between the organization and its suppliers, or the terms of the contract between the organization and the suppliers. These are approaches. So if the contract terms insist that CSR be incorporated in the agreement signed or in the terms of contract, it is a good tool that could influence change. The proportion of sales the organization represents for the supplier is also another tool, and the ability of the organization to incentivize the supplier to improve performance in terms of future sales, reputational advantage, capacity building assistance, and so on. This influence is possible when it's coming from the procuring entities, and the suppliers will be, we'll see it as a competitive edge to key into the sustainability standards that has been set by the procuring agency. The reputation benefits for the supplier is also a key factor that can drive change, for working within the organization or not being able to work within the organization if maybe past supplies standards were poor or so. The ability of the organizations to collaborate with other buyers, including industry peers, to incentivize improved performance could be another key point to be able to drive change. So these factors are considered to fall within an organization's sphere of influence, most especially the management sphere of influence. I have these priorities. Next slide, please. This is a sustainability hierarchy that could be used to prioritize sustainability issues. The head of the procurement team, for instance, by using this hierarchy, will understand that when selecting suppliers, it is more important to choose the one that offer safe and healthy working environment, that is level 2, rather than those that offer freedom of association, that is level 4. And this process should be made transparent so that other suppliers can be carried along and can know the competitive parameters used by the procuring agency to select its contractors. So it is important that the organization's actions are scaled to a societal level by assessing the scenarios where all organizations behaved in the same manner. The organization must have a policy with a defined long-term objectives that go beyond the organization lifespan and make a long-term commitment to stick to these objectives, standards, and policies as may be developed. Okay, so we move quickly to policy and strategy. Next slide, please. Organizations need policies, sustainable procurement policies. If it's not available, they have to make it, or it could be a part of an existing policy for the organization, but contradictions should be avoided. So there may be need for a review of procurement policies in different corporations or in government quarters. There may be a need to review the procurement policies to make sure that while we are trying to incorporate sustainable procurement strategy in our policies, we make sure that we don't create contradictions that could lead to more problems. So an organization should, to the fullest extent possible, exercise its capacity to influence the behavior of its suppliers and other stakeholders towards sustainability. Members of the top management or individuals that undertake sustainability initiative can use the hierarchy that I showed you earlier when prioritizing sustainability issues and influence their suppliers in many ways that they could, just like I have mentioned above. You can use the terms of the contract between the organization and the supplier. You can use the degree of direct control between the organization and the supplier. You know, influence can also derive from factors that are reputational issues concerned, just like I mentioned earlier. So in general, there are 6 major, let me not say they are major, but there are 6 main considerations for sustainable procurement best practice. You can see number 1, to lead by example. Leading by example, that's providing a clear path for your procurement team and your suppliers. This is done through consistent leadership and policy making on sustainable procurement. You can see number 2 is set clear priorities. Set clear priorities, then raise the bar, that is, enforce the existing procurement policy and standards across all procurement activities. In this way, you will improve your purchasing performance as well as uphold the underlying expectations, sustainable expectations, and build capacity also, because this is important. Capacities are important. It increases your staff readiness, and it's good to increase your organization's capacities by professionally developing your staff. This also includes the provision of resources to support efficient, sustainable procurement measures. You can remove barriers, because barriers are many. Like I said earlier in my presentation, the barriers are overwhelming. Of course, lack of awareness is one of it, but there are other barriers which needs to be removed. A budgetary mechanism needs to be put in place that promotes sustainable procurement by all means. And then you seize the opportunities, be it public or private business. They need to become more open to innovation and proactively seek opportunities which drive social benefits through their engagement with suppliers and the wider market in general. In concluding, I would like to mention how to get started with ISO 20400. Next slide, please. ISO 20400 is very much available. It is, thank you. You consider the following tips. First, you evaluate your buying culture, your current buying culture. What is it like? And then second, you think strategically, inform yourself about your supply chain, and then get the top management support. I would try to circulate this slide, and so that you can access this link below. This will be of great help for how to get started with ISO 20400. And of course, you can talk to Richflood to get started as well. You can send an email to Richflood, info@richflood.com, to get started first with capacity building, creating awareness, like the challenges I had earlier mentioned. Creating awareness is key, and understanding what the standard is all about, what are the sustainability principles that is required, and how do we get started looking at our own buying culture in that organization or corporation, either in government or in the public sector. And we can systematically go through the process together. So you can reach the Richflood office, and you'll be sure to have, next slide, please. You'll be sure to have an answer on how to go about your sustainable procurement goals in your organization. Thank you for your time. And from me, thank you for listening.
Thank you, ma'am, for that outstanding presentation. We have received a couple of questions from our participants during the course of the presentation. And please keep sending in your questions using the chat box, and our speakers will address them appropriately. I would like to quickly remind our participants that the recording of this presentation, including the morning session, will be made available on our YouTube channel. That is the Richflood YouTube channel. Right now, it's time to have our second presentation for this session. Over to you, Mr. Gabriel, for your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Yellow, for this opportunity. One of the motivation of this 21st century is the growing commitment of well-meaning organizations and corporate bodies towards sustainable procurement. And according to UNEP, sustainable procurement is the process of making purchasing decisions. That meets with an organization's needs for goods and services in a way that it benefits not only the organization, but society as a whole, and most importantly, the environment. And for tracing on this, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply report on sustainability states that typical sustainable procurement practice includes compliance with environmental laws and targets, the removal of hazardous materials and waste from the supply chain, and the thorough vetting of suppliers for fair labor practices. And that is to say that every conforming stakeholder are to be concerned about what the organization is buying, who it buys from, and how it uses the goods and services once bought. Know that it can have a huge influence on the organization, its environment, and the society at large. For this purpose, clear accountability for sustainable procurement should be established. There should be a clear designation of roles and level of accountability well spelled out. Now, beginning with the top management as indicated on this illustration, to procurement management, and down to staffs and individuals who are responsible for the actual procurement. And one of the ways sustainable procurement can be achieved is the transformation of businesses from linear economy to circular economy. The most practiced economy today is the linear economy, where raw natural resources are taken, transformed into products for consumption, and get disposed of. In 2018, European Commissioner for Environment, Maritime Affairs and Fishery, Carmenu Vela, stated that linear economy is considered to be a form of economy that is not viable, because in the long term, the resources of the planet will be insufficient to maintain this economic model. For circular economy, Ellen MacArthur's Foundation states that circular economy is restorative, regenerative by design, and which aim to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value at all times. Now, this model aims to close the gap between production and natural ecosystem sectors on which humans ultimately depend upon. And this means, on one hand, giving no room for waste generation, for instance, composing biodegradable waste, or if it is transformed and non-biodegradable waste. On the other hand, it also means cutting off the use of chemicals, a way to help regenerate natural system, the natural system, and betting on renewable energy. To get started with sustainable procurement in organizations, or to get the most out of sustainable procurement in organizations, it is worth considering integrating sustainability into procurement process. The circle begins with planning to integrating requirements into specification before selecting suppliers to manage the contract, and finally reviewing and learning from the contracts. To start up the integration process, planning is of essence. First, knowing your sourcing strategy. The sourcing strategy can be as short as one page of a simple procurement project, just a brief note, or considerably larger for complex procurement projects. And your sourcing strategy should include key findings about sustainable risks, key findings about sustainability risks, including opportunities, needs, and the supply markets. It should also include the actions required to manage key sustainability risks, including opportunity, and also how sustainability aspects are incorporated into the draft contracts or terms and conditions. And finally, your sourcing strategy should also indicate the impacts of the sustainability approach on the project plan and budgets. Now, the next item on the planning is defining sustainable procurement criteria. Defining sustainable procurement criteria. When including sustainability criteria in the procurement process, the organization should take care that the sustainability criteria, number one, reflects the priority defined in the sourcing strategies. For example, by including key sustainability requirements in the minimum sustainability criteria. And number two, the sustainability criteria should also take care that it is clearly defined without any risk of bias. And finally, on planning, choosing the types of requirements, and that is also very important. Different types of requirements can be used. You may use the physical or descriptive requirements, and this specify the characteristics of the goods and the services. Or you may decide to use a performance requirements that defines, the performance requirement defines, it ensures that the goods meet up with the necessary requirements. And finally, under the planning, the functional requirements also defines the proposed function to be fulfilled by the goods and services required. Now, moving from there is integrating sustainability requirements identified into specification that will necessitate the evaluation of sustainability requirements that are met. And how do you do this? It starts with evaluation of procedures involved, such as documentation, testing, inspection, audits, certification, evaluating the management system, assessments, sustainability claim, the labels, and declaration, or a combination of them. And when doing this, you have in mind the ISO standards that address conformity assessments. So the ISO standards that address conformity assessment should be used where relevant when establishing evaluation procedure. And when choosing an evaluation procedure, the organization should balance costs in connection with the desired level of assurance. Selecting suppliers during awarding of contracts basically depends on 4 common methods. And number one is rewarding superior standard performance. And this might include recognition of the ability of goods and services to enhance sustainability of the organization's own goods and services. And what other method also? The other method is the qualitative judgment. Qualitative judgment can be used. And that implies that suppliers, especially in the service industries, could be requested to summarize their experience and methods in relation to sustainability criteria within their tenders. Now, this enables organizations to assess their approach to managing major sustainability risks, including opportunities identified during the planning stage. The third method is the fit for purpose assessment that enables identification and evaluation of goods and services that may not be sufficiently robust, leading to higher repairs and replacement of costs. And finally, under the method is the method of cost calculation. The method of cost calculation to ensure that true value for money is achieved, resulting in the selection of the best supplier over the life of the contracts. Now, managing the contracts implies managing the contracts. Managing the contract can be managed, managing the supplier's relationship by managing the supplier's relationship and also by implementing the contracts. In managing the supplier's relationship, sustainability commitment of an organization should reflect in the quality of the relationship of its relationship with its suppliers. And implementing the contracts, it is critical that awareness and focus on sustainable elements and associated performance targets are communicated and understood by relevant internal stakeholders to ensure that any sustainability commitments made in the contracts are fully implemented. And finally, contract review should include reviewing and learning from the contract to improve the system. And that is, the buying organization should conduct regular reviews of the contract throughout its duration, as well as the completion of the contract. So this is vital to ensuring that lessons learned during the life of this contract can be shared and continually monitored, can be shared and continually improved. Improvements can take place to achieve better sustainability performance. In conclusion, sustainable procurement is clearly not about bordering the market with extra requirements. Rather, it is a well-defined strategy that gradually phases out a sustainable requirements in bids and promotes support measures, dialogue, and open communication between the suppliers and the procurer. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Agabwe, for that insightful presentation. We received a couple of questions from our participants during the course of the two presentations. And the first question that came in was from Oloa Shein. And Oloa Shein was asking to find out if there are environmental regulations or laws in Nigeria that support or promote sustainable procurement in a circular economy. And that question was directed to Dr. Comfort Ogaji. Oloa Shein was trying to find out if there are environmental regulations or laws in Nigeria that support or promote sustainable procurement and circular economy that's in Nigeria. Over to you, ma'am, to address the question.
Thank you very much. Yes, there are laws that have been enacted that can be upgraded to focus on addressing sustainable procurement. But as for circular economy, I know of a number of regulations that is available at NESTRA's website, nestra.gov.ng. I hope I got that right. We partner with NESTRA a lot on these capacity building programs, and there has been a number of times they have come to educate us as well on the available laws. So yes, there is some regulations on that could address circular economy, but as for procurement, in terms of sustainable procurement in itself, it has to come from the Bureau of Public Procurement, I think, and also perhaps the Federal Ministry of Environment, which is the ministry saddled with the responsibility of protecting the Nigerian environment, or in any African country, most of which the federal Ministry of Environment or the relevant agency is to develop laws and policies that could promote in the public sector, that could promote sustainable procurement. But coming down to corporations, I think each organization is responsible for its contributions to either destroy the earth or sustain it for our children and children's children to be able to have an earth to live in. So it's either you are supporting sustainability or you are destroying the earth. As one of it, there is no in between. So organizations can look into their existing policies, like I said, and upgrade whatever is available to be able to meet the standard requirements. And also the European Union directives is also available for us. There are quite a number of resources and international laws that could be visited by local governments or different states to be able to imbibe the sustainable procurement policies into their existing procurement policy to make sure that their suppliers, contractors, and subcontractors, or their stakeholders in general, are in line with the outcomes that promotes sustainability within the procurement processes. Over to you, Keme.
Thank you very much, Ma, for addressing that question. And I think as a follow-up to that, there's another question that came in, and it was still from Oluwaseyin. He was trying to find out the processes that is required to go through in terms of capacity development as regards sustainable procurement measures. So he wants to know the steps to follow in building capacity in terms of the capacity, sustainable procurement measures.
Okay, yes. So that's very interesting that you're interested in developing capacity. Like I said, the first problem we have is that of lack of awareness. So there are lots of platforms that you can develop capacity as a person and even become a lead manager or a lead implementer for sustainable procurement. And that's the standard that we have discussed today, which is ISO 20400. I think that's a good place to start. You can start as a lead implementer depending on your level of education and understanding, or you could pick up the introductory training and be able to build capacity. And then you go forward for the lead implementer, and then you can now graduate to be a lead manager for sustainable procurement. It is an ISO standard, and Richflood, of course, undertakes this service to train you. In collaboration with PECB Canada, we can certify, you can become a certified manager for sustainable procurement. I would like to see if the moderator or the facilitators would be able to get this information across to you. You can register, you can be a part of it. And if you're talking on behalf of your organization, you can get your management commitment towards this standard procedure, and we would be there to partner with you to make it a reality. So you can keep in touch, and it's not what we can finish discussing in this platform. Over to you, Mr. Okeme.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matt. I believe Oluwaseyin has really gotten the explanation and the guide to go through all that. The next question is from Joel Ezekiel, and Joel is trying to find out who are those responsible for making sure that sustainable procurement and a circular economy is achieved in organization. The question was still directed to you, ma'am. who are those responsible for making sure that the sustainable procurement and circular economy is achieved in an organization?
In an organization. Okay, thank you very much. I want to say it's just that he added in an organization. Otherwise, I would say you are responsible. I am responsible. We are all responsible for making sustainability in everything that we do. I have a bottle of water here. I don't know if my video is showing. I can't see myself, but I have this bottle of water and it is made up of plastic. I have the choice to buy water packaged in a biodegradable material instead of procuring this one that has to do with being produced with plastic. You all know the problems of plastic and how it gets to the waste streams and what goes on and on and on. So I have the procuring power to procure what could be sustainable, not add to the waste stream, not to do procurement in terms of in linearity, but in circularity. I have the right to do that. I can decide. I have the decisive power to procure according to what I think. So ordinarily, I shouldn't procure this. So it starts with you. It starts with me. And then if you talk about organizations, because you ended your question with in an organization, it starts from the top management, because once the top management drives this by way of just issuing a policy statement that could be a page, like Mr. Peter said, that could be a page document, and that's your policy statement, automatically the next responsibility goes on to the managers, the line managers within the organization. So the procurement director, for instance, if it's a government organization, or the whatever the position is called, whoever is responsible for procuring, it will not be its responsibility. But we want to make this commitment a management thing, in my opinion, and also in line with some standards that we have shared also. It should be a leadership or a management responsibility to ensure that these things are done. For instance, if you're going to buy cars, are you going to buy cars that will emit more emissions into the atmosphere, like the program Richflood is having by next month? Yes, I think that has to do with emissions inventory or something like that. So you could be an organization that is contributing a lot of greenhouse gases, emitting a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere through your procuring policy or your existing procuring culture that needs to be changed, or that needs to be revamped, or that needs to be reviewed in order to have this sustainable procurement incorporated or embedded into the existing policies within the organizations. So emissions could be through buying of cars. If you're to buy cars, and instead of buying cars that could reduce or have zero emissions into the environment, perhaps you're buying some used car that have reached end of life, and the increase in emissions goes on and on. So these decisions is in our everyday life as persons, and also as organizations, like I said in my presentation, from smaller organizations to even larger organizations and governments of countries and globally. It's all our responsibilities, but most importantly, the management of organizations have to show their commitment. And then leadership is everything. Even politicians, I forgot to add, even politicians could drive these processes. Politicians, they're in a very good position to drive these processes and insist that standards are maintained in order to safeguard the environment for future generations. I hope I answered these questions. Mr. Okeme, over to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. You really done justice to those questions. I'm afraid because of time, we will not be able to take questions from other participants because our time is fast spent. Other comments that came in was by way of commendations to the first and second speakers, and also thanking Richflood for organizing this event.
Indeed, it was a wonderful experience. We thank everyone for attending and for your contribution in today's workshop. We hope to see you again on the 17th of June for the next edition of our monthly workshop. And as we will be having key players in the industry who will be discussing emission inventories. That is what corporations need to know about emission inventories. So before we finally draw the curtain on today's workshop, we will implore all to switch on your video for a group photograph.